Lower cell phone prices? Well, it was a populist promise during the fall federal election, with both the Liberals and the NDP pitching a cut to your monthly bill. Well, today, the Liberal government announced their plan to make good on their campaign promise. They want the big three telcos to drop their prices for certain plans by 25% in the next 2 years. But how are they going to do it? And when could you start seeing savings on your bill? Let's find out. Joining us now is the Minister on the File. Joining me now is Navdeep Bains, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industries in Toronto. Minister, great to have you back on the program. Okay, so you guys are announcing today that you want to reduce mid-range wireless services by 25%. How will you enforce that?
So you're absolutely correct. We are following through on our campaign commitment to reduce cell phone bills by 25%. Starting January 1st and over the next 2 years. And in terms of accountability, to your question, if the companies, and these are the large three carriers, if they're unable to meet that 25% commitment, we'll look at additional regulatory measures, which includes potentially how we deploy future spectrum or mobile virtual network operators. These were issues that were discussed at the latest CRTC hearing.
Yeah, let me just tell people, these other network operators are essentially carriers that don't actually build the infrastructure, they rent it, and they don't own it. Now,
you got it, that's correct, that's exactly it.
You know that in front of the CRTC, many CEOs of telecom companies have said, when you do this, when you get these other operators to take to use the infrastructure that we've paid to build, when you're forcing us to reduce our prices, we're just going to stop investing. We're going to stop investing billions of dollars. We're going to cut our workforce. What do you say to industry when they say that?
Well, first of all, as you can see, they're really concerned about MVNOs, mobile virtual network operators, and the CRTC has just completed the hearing, so I'm not going to prejudge the work that they're going to do in terms of the recommendations they make. But in terms of investments, Evan, we have put forward progressive tax policy. That means we've got the lowest marginal tax rate for new investments at 13.8%. We've also worked very closely in partnership with these companies to roll out high-speed internet connectivity. A government program that we put forward in the last mandate was Connect to Innovate. This was a $500 million investment to de-risk some of these investments into these rural and remote communities. But more importantly, 5G is so critical. And this spectrum that we are moving forward with, that I announced a set aside for today, is going to be critical for future investments as well.
Okay, but you know the telcos are.
And so the market conditions are pretty good. The market conditions are pretty good where you've got strong regional players and the large three players that need to make these investments if they want to continue to grow.
Right, although you're not telling the regional players they have to do this. Well, you know, the big telcos are going to say to you, I don't get what you're trying to tell us to do. The message from the government is this: please invest billions of dollars in new infrastructure to create 5G. Please expand your footprint to include rural areas. And by the way, lower your prices by 25%. What do you think they're going to say to that? Isn't that a conflicting message?
No, not at all. I think it's very consistent with our government's policies. We want to reduce prices. We want lower prices. And Evan, that's really important because when we knocked on doors during the campaign and we talked to Canadians directly, they talked about housing pressures and the cost of housing. They talked about increases to the cost of groceries. They talked about, for example, with families around school supplies and the cost pressures around that. And they also mentioned that they are paying some of the highest cell phone prices that compared to their peers in the US and other countries. And they're correct. We pay some of the highest prices in the G7 and compared to the US. So we want to see lower prices. We want to ensure access, which I highlighted the importance of government working with the telecommunication companies around high-speed internet connectivity. And more importantly, we want to ensure high-quality networks. And I'm confident that those policies are consistent with what we've said to the telecommunication companies, and they can achieve this 25% goal because the prices have come down. And that's what the Wall report indicated, which we published today as well, but more needs to be done.
Okay, but the telcos are pressing back here, and I just want to get you to answer this.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got the 25% mandated price cut over 2 years, which I appreciate. The CRTC released a communications monitoring report last year that said wireless prices have already come down between 28 and 35% on this very same plans. This is before these telcos had the unlimited data plans that they say will lower overage prices way more. So how do you reconcile? It seems like there's two different data streams that we're trying to reconcile here.
No, bottom line is you can look at that data or the data that we released in the Wall report. But the bottom line is that we still pay some of the highest prices compared to the US and amongst the G7. So clearly prices need to go down. And that's the point we're making, is that when you see prices go down, that's good for consumers. And the way we're driving that is through more competition, which means more innovation and more choices for consumers.
A lot of people might wonder if you're going back to the old, it's almost like a wage and price control. In this case, price control. Why is it the government's job to tell industries, market-based industries, here's where you're going to be on price? Why does the government know what their expenses are? Does the government know what it costs to build infrastructure? Does the government, I mean, shouldn't the market just work? Why do you guys need to control prices?
So we have a two-pronged approach. One is to promote more regional competition, and where we have strong regional competition, prices are 45% lower for the consumer. So that's a great policy that we're continuing to move ahead with the spectrum set aside. On the other hand, we want to reduce prices as well, because these are essential wireless services that people need to succeed in this new data-driven and digital economy. So this is not a cool thing to have. It's not something that we'd want to have. It's a must. If students want to succeed at school, if people want to succeed at work, if people want to access information, they need affordable wireless pricing choices going forward, and that's exactly what we presented.
There was another report that the CRTC had, and they're saying that your government wants to put all sorts of new prices and surcharges and basically taxes on all sorts of other internet services in order to support Canadian content. So I'm just trying to make sure, isn't that all going to filter down to the consumer anyway? So on one hand, you're trying to lower. On the other hand, there's measures it seems like you guys are about to adopt that are going to raise prices. So what is it?
The message is very clear. We made a commitment during the campaign to reduce prices by 25%. We've unveiled our plan today to move forward with that plan, and we're going to hold the large three carriers accountable and to make sure they meet that target.
Let me just switch topics real quick to Huawei.
Sure.
Are you going to have any, when's the decision coming if Huawei can be part of 5G? TELUS is already going ahead. They said we're going to work with Huawei. What are you going to say about that?
The companies will make their own determination. They assess their own risk levels. They have their own operating mandate. They have their own strategic plans. For us, we're still doing our due diligence. I'm working very closely with Minister Blair, Minister Sajjan. I'm working with our international allies to understand kind of what they've done, what's working, what's not working. Bottom line is we'll make a decision that's in our interest, that will make sure that we move forward in a manner that protects Canadians and keeps them safe and secure as we roll out 5G.
Well, why don't you tell, if telcos are already telling you we're got to get moving on 5G, here you guys are saying go build the 5G, but you guys are waiting and waiting to find out who they can partner with. This is a consequential decision worth billions of dollars. When will the decision on Huawei come?
Each company has their own process in terms of where they're making the investment. So this is not true across the industry. Certain companies have certain suppliers. Bottom line for us is we're going to make a decision when we have all the appropriate information and when we're confident that we can move forward in a manner that can clearly articulate to Canadians the importance of keeping them safe and secure. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to work on our own timeline. We're going to make sure that we do the appropriate due diligence and come forward with a very thoughtful, forward-looking decision.
But sir, I just got to push back. The UK's made a decision.
Sure,
the United States has made a decision. You're literally out here telling telcos, please invest in 5G. It's really critical. It's coming fast, and drop your prices. And by the way, the partners that you may want to use, who you're using for 4G, like Huawei, we may on our own time figure out if you can use them or not. Just why don't you give them some stability and say, in the next 30 days, we're going to have a decision on Huawei? Why is Canada lagging so far behind on this?
We're not lagging at all. The exact contrary, Evan. If you look at the spectrum auctions that are taking place, we just had the 600
lagging
megahertz
on
auction,
Huawei.
the
Lagging on the
3500.
Huawei decision.
Yeah, so more broadly speaking on terms of which companies can engage on the 5G, that decision point we'll make at the appropriate time. But when it comes to spectrum allocation, we're playing a leadership role internationally. That's why we're rolling out the 3,500 megahertz, which is really critical spectrum for 5G this year. And that was a commitment we made 2 years ago, and we're honoring that commitment.
Okay, just two last things real quick. If
Sure.
Huawei's the cheapest option for 5G, and you're trying, the telcos come to you and say, hey, we're going to lower our prices by 25% on everything, just as you say, but in order to do that, we need to work with Huawei. Will that impact your decision?
There's nothing more important than the safety and security and the well-being of Canadians. That's going to drive our decision making. And that's what the companies know, and we've been very transparent about that.
Minister, you're also on this special committee that was just struck by the Prime Minister on the coronavirus. Businesses are worried about supply chain disruption, employee disruption, there are shortages. What messages right now are you sending to the business community that the government might do to help if the coronavirus situation gets worse?
Look, we know this is a challenging time for Canadians. There's real health concerns. There's clear impact to the economy, as you mentioned, in terms of supply chain impacts and them being disrupted by COVID-19. The Bank of Canada has moved forward with monetary policies to ease, borrowing rates for businesses and for consumers. Bottom line from us and my perspective is to businesses that we've got the fiscal capacity to help them, and we've got the fiscal room to do so, and we've got their back, and that we will demonstrate that the government will do everything it possibly can to help consumers and Canadian businesses.
Okay, so that sounds like some kind of stimulus package is being prepared for the next budget in the event that we need it. Is that fair to say?
Well, when it comes to the next budget and what's in it, the Minister of Finance is in a much better position to answer the specifics. What I'm saying is that if we need to take action, we've got the fiscal capacity and the fiscal room to do so.
All right, I got to leave it there. Minister Bains, always a pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan.